Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, then, greetings from Bangkok, Thailand, and from UNESCAP as well. And it really is my honour and pleasure to welcome you warmly to the 4th Global Dialogue on Ocean Accounts. Now, when I think of oceans, I think of where I grew up in Papua New Guinea, where years ago, when I was a little child, the seas were crystal clear, full of fish and really brightly coloured corals. But where I visited just a few years ago, and I saw firsthand how the small canoes have been replaced by large commercial fishing vessels, and where the brightly coloured coral reefs are now bleached and the diversity of marine life has certainly reduced. But this is why these dialogues on ocean accounts are so important. Our oceans need rescue, and policies and plans for sustainable development of our oceans need better data so they can be appropriately designed, monitored, and implemented. And the need for better data is not in question, but we need to promote and increase awareness of the utility of ocean accounts to anchor broad coalitions of policy and scientific organizations working towards a shared goal of better data. And that is really, in a nutshell, what the Global Dialogues on Ocean Accounting are all about. And at UNESCAP, we really do enjoy and take great pride in co-chairing the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, GOAP. I'm really pleased that we can also see the continued expansion, both in depth and in reach, of GOAP. And since the establishment of GOAP in the first dialogue back in 2019, we really have come a long way, and there's a lot to celebrate.
And there are now active pilot and wider implementation projects in Asia, Africa, the Pacific, North America, Central America, and Europe, with many more projects in the scoping phase. We're also seeing the rise of regional collaborative projects linked to regional ocean governance mechanisms. And on the screen now, you'll see an overview of some key indicators from 10 ocean accounts implementation projects driven by in-country, locally based partners that the GOAP Secretariat is familiar with and provides a degree of coordination support. These figures do not cover all active pilot or implementation projects globally. I stress that this is just a subset of the enormity of practice that is going on, but it does remain illustrative of the achievements that the global community engaged in this issue has progressed since the inaugural technical discussion of this issue, which was in late 2018, convened by UNESCAP, one of our co-chairs for the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership. So we now have pilot or broader implementation ocean accounts projects covering more than 825 million hectares of marine and coastal areas. That includes 29 million hectares of marine protected areas that have been accounted for, either in terms of the environment, links between the environment and the economy, or links from the economy back to the environment. We have 108 discrete designated marine protected areas subject to ocean accounts coverage, 5 planned regional projects, and by regional, I mean multi-country, linked to ocean governance mechanisms, and 10 ongoing pilot implementation activities covering 7 countries. That's what these statistics are drawn from. We have 31,000 hectares of seagrass meadows, 92,000 hectares of coral reef, 197,000 hectares of other ecosystems, and by far the front runner from an accounting coverage point of view is mangrove forests, more than 10.5 million hectares of those currently subject to pilot or broader implementation accounts. So this is just to put some quantitative context on all of the hard work that is really evident across the world, and underscores the need for us to have continued discussions about how we go further with this to ensure that countries, governments, and other stakeholders have access to the information they need to make decisions that bend the arc of development towards global commitments on climate change, biodiversity, and sustainable development.
Looking into natural capital accounting in the Maldives, this is something very new for us, and we have initiated this process through a project funded by GEF. This is actually a project designed under GEF's 6-star allocation for the Maldives. And the project is focused on one of the atolls of the Maldives known as Lamu Atoll. It started in 24 December 2020 and is expected to finish on 30th December 2024. So the duration is for 4 years. The project aim is to assist the government of Maldives in the implementation of new environment policies and transition towards national adoption of green growth atoll development. And the atoll that the project is focused on is Lamu Atoll, as you can see from this slide. And also to sustain marine natural capital and strengthen the resilience and recovery of reef ecosystems. So overall, the project objective is to enhance the resilience of the atoll ecosystems as well as the people based in the atoll. You can see a map of the Maldives. For those who do not know where the Maldives is located, it's very hard to spot us on the map because our land area is very small. And we have about 1,200 islands grouped into 26 natural atolls. And one of the atolls that the project is focused on is known as Lamu Atoll. There are about 75 islands in the atoll, out of which 11 are inhabited. That means people live only on 11 islands. The rest are uninhabited, and some of them are leased for tourism operation, some for agriculture, some for fishing practices, aquaculture, and industrial purposes such as airport development. So most of the islands in Lamu Atoll are uninhabited in natural condition, and this is why the project is very much well designed for this atoll. Here's the timeline of the project development process that went on since 2017. So the initial design started in 2017, and we got just CEO approval in 2020. And in 2021, the project management unit was established, and the first recruitment process was finalized in 2021. It takes a while for the project from the design phase to the final implementation phase, but at the same time, the process included a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of visits to the atoll, and so it really resulted in us having a good project that we are hopeful that would result in fruitful outcomes. Here are the project partners. So obviously GEF is the funding agency, and then we have the implementing agency, that is United Nations Environment Program. I wanted to focus on the intended outcomes of NDRI project, because while natural capital accounting or ocean accounting is just one component of the project, the other components of the project also work together to achieve the successful outcome of the accounting process. It is a very holistic design where each and every component complement each other. There have also been small grants awarded through this project to the community of Lamu Atoll. 9 grants have been awarded based on some priority areas of the project, and this has really resulted in the community taking more ownership of the project and really being excited about the outcomes of the project. This project, while focused on Lamu Atoll, would have national implications as well, because this will bring about huge changes to the conservation sector and the development planning in the Maldives, because we are hoping that the natural capital accounting will contribute to the national accounts, and then in the future will help inform the decision making in the process of strategic action plans for the national development in the Maldives and so on.
In the Maldivian context, the natural capital accounting is very unique and important at the same time. Unique in the sense we are an atoll island ecosystem, which is hugely dependent on our natural environment and natural resources for our economy, such as our tourism and fisheries are the main 2 economic sectors that is directly related to the natural capital. However, it is not taken into account during our national capital accounting. So this natural capital accounting process will help Maldives in making pathway for our future planning process in terms of fiscal policies and conservation policies. So the intended outcome for natural capital accounting in the Maldives is very much related to reroute the environmental policies towards a green growth system, and also understanding how natural capital will strengthen the resiliency and recovery of our reefs and ultimately address the climate change impacts in revising our policies towards a better future. So in the Maldivian context, we have currently started the works of the natural capital accounting, and we have defined our scope and method. In terms of the method, we will be following the system of environmental economic accounts. Here, a natural capital accounting covering the whole nation is very important, but the first pilot one will be specific on one atoll. As Lisama has highlighted, it would be focusing on the natural capital account of Lamu Atoll, which has all the components of the economic sector, such as tourism, fisheries, and healthy ecosystem. Another reason that we selected Lamu Atoll was it had some baseline and previous works undertaken through various projects for baseline studies, which so far under the Endery project, we are working with UNSW, University of New South Wales, to undertake the natural capital accounting in the Maldives. And the first inception has been completed, and after the inception, the team traveled to Lamu Atoll to actually ground truth the existing information to the Lamu Atoll context. So we requested them to undertake sort of a list of all the data that is available and relate that to the ground truthing as well. And in the Maldives, this is a very new concept. So we have requested them and undertaken a public lecture and a workshop on natural capital accounting, because ultimately when the project is completed, we want this knowledge to be retained in the country. So our main focus is developing the capacity of Maldives National University through this project, while undertaking the pilot process of natural capital accounting in the Maldives. Also, we want to ensure that key stakeholders are involved in this process from economic sectors such as fisheries, tourism, and also mainstream in natural capital accounting into the statistics. So National Bureau of Statistics and Ministry of Finance are involved in the technical committee, which would lead the pathway of identifying the technical scope and also implementing and advising on the natural capital accounting in the process, and ultimately advising, taking it back to their relevant sectors. So what are the next steps in the Maldives? We have identified the need for additional data and also GIS mapping and management. And there is a gap regarding communication and outreach. So information and awareness on what is natural capital accounting and how it can be carried forward. And interestingly, we were quite surprised that our Auditor General and our audit office was quite keen and interested in this process. Actually, they are way ahead, I think, in thinking that auditing natural capital account is very important in the auditing purposes of Maldives, because our economy and our livelihood is totally dependent on natural capital account. And currently, most of the focus is on human capital or other fiscal and hard like financial capitals, GDP, and these figures does not take into account natural capital account. So Audit Office is also a key partner in this process and was very involved during the inception process, which was a surprise to Maldives. And we are currently building capacity through this technical committee being involved in the process. And a need for additional data collection is identified, which is quite interesting because we thought that there would be a huge data gap, but once you start the process, you will be surprised to identify how much information already is there that could be used for this process. Also, how much is missing that needs to be filled to fill the gap for kickstarting the natural capital accounting process. From our work so far, which over the past year, we have understood that as Lisama has identified funding to project implementation, there is a delay. And also we started the project during the COVID period. And even little processes such as administrative things regarding procurement and information regarding who would be the best partner was there was a gap which led to procurement delays. But I think GOAP and these partnerships allow us to identify like who is out there and how we can learn from each other regarding what has been undertaken, and also compilation of data. And it is quite weird context where there is a lot of data, but in the Maldives, there is no one location where we can access all the data. So it's a huge undertaking where you have to identify the existing data and also how it is related to the Maldives. And I think all the projects that have been undertaken in LAMATO actually has done a lot of work. But once the project is completed, there is no process where there would be a national database where all these data can be compiled. So currently, we have identified that National Bureau of Statistics would be that organization that should harbor the platform that should harbor all the data collected in the Maldives. Also, Maldives National University should play a huge role in undertaking this data. And ultimately, I think this also comes back to access and benefit sharing, where a lot of studies are undertaken in the Maldives, but the government of Maldives or the Maldivians sometimes do not even have any idea that this was undertaken or what was understood through these studies. So I think there is a need for mainstreaming access and benefit sharing and also data sharing. And of course, as mentioned before, need for global partnerships. In the Maldivian context, we may be focusing on atoll island ecosystems, but I think this process and would help other countries. And also we have learned from other countries. I think the next panelist, Irfan, was involved with the UNSW in the Maldivian inception and visit, and we learned huge from the Indonesian context. So I think their need for global partnership cannot be more emphasized. How can we relate this back to the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework? I think natural capital accounting will help us identify the key ecosystems that we need to protect in order to sustain our economy. And also where are the gaps in terms of identifying the need for restoration, where we increase the natural capital accounting value by restoring the degraded environment. Also, identify the need for effective management in order to ensure these natural capital accounting values are taken into future generation. Also, the need for mainstreaming biodiversity to other economic sector. I think this is an opportunity for us through natural capital accounting to take this to finance GDP, fiscal planning, economic development, and other economic sectors such as fisheries, agriculture, and tourism, which is our key economic pillars depending on natural capital account and capacity building, and ultimately retaining the knowledge at national level to ensure that through this pilot project, we are able to roll it back to other atolls, also to a national level.
The presentation we just heard from colleagues in the Maldives really, to me, indicates that foundational role of bringing together data and statistics in an integrated manner can achieve. It has applications that we heard about for marine protected areas and meeting of 30 by 30 targets, environmental policy, but also building off that use case, a whole range of other use cases across the machinery of government related to the audit office and value for money and how government delivers services and their dependencies on nature, green growth planning, resilience. So lots of resonant themes. We just heard about how we move beyond GDP through accounts and some of the practical difficulties and challenges we have to face, one of which mentioned the importance of data sharing and data sovereignty, so that any data generated is shared with the people who have responsibilities to make decisions about those ecosystems and environments and communities that are studied, an important ethical consideration.
The Ocean Accounts Initiative in Indonesia started in 2020, leading by the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries in collaboration with the Ministry of National Development Planning, Ministry of Finance, Statistics Indonesia, and Geospatial Agency. And we, Rekam Nusantara Foundation, as a member of GOAP, joining in 2021 to support this initiative. And then all of the members of the Indonesian Ocean Account Initiative, we involved in several activities such as developing a roadmap for ocean accounts, doing data inventory and analysis, developing priority accounts and areas, and developing pilots, and also doing stakeholder engagement and capacity building, as well as incorporating ocean accounts into ocean policies in Indonesia. And then from 3 years journey in Indonesia, Indonesia is open for learning exchange, especially related to the developing ocean accounts pilot, especially for the MBA and marine spatial planning, and incorporating the ocean accounts into policy, such as for the marine spatial planning, marine protected areas, and fisheries management. We start the collaboration with Maldives last year related to the ocean accounts development in Maldives, or natural capital accounting, because of Maldives in Indonesia. We are maritime countries where we have a high dependency to the marine ecosystem, and to achieve sustainable economic development and sustainable resources, natural capital accounting is crucial to support decision-making system and also to strengthen existing policies. And in Indonesia has successfully developed the ocean accounts pilots in 2021 and bringing the pilot into the national-wide system of ocean accounts. And with this experience, we bring our knowledge to support the national natural capital accounting development in Maldives. And besides bringing the knowledge and experience, we also take a lesson learned from the process in Maldives to improve the implementation of ocean accounts in Indonesia. And then the collaboration objective, I think the previous presenter already explained about the Lamu Atoll as a pilot, and we support the stakeholders in government and stakeholder in Maldives related to the assessing the ecosystem, coral reef, mangrove, and seagrass related to the extent and condition, developing a GIS map, and later on to be used for the integrated coastal zone management and bring the connection between SEEA and spatial planning. And we also support related to the capacity building for the university, government, and local government in Maldives. And then this is the benefit from our collaboration. So we have opportunity and exchange related to the knowledge and expertise to advance ocean account, not only in Maldives, but also in Indonesia. We enrich the methodology, data, community practice related to the ocean accounts implementation for both countries, and leverage the roles of ocean account, not only in each country, but also as part of the global commitment to sustain sustainable development and biodiversity outcomes. And from our collaboration, we have lesson learned. Ocean account approach are valuable to support ocean management system in both countries, Indonesia and Maldives. And multi-stakeholder support is a vital foundation for the ocean accounts, and a challenge related the lack of data or scattered and range of methodology and stakeholder interest can be addressed through diagnostic tools, consultation, dialogue, and collaborative action among stakeholders. And this is need to be addressed in the beginning, where the starting from a pilot is very important, and later on we can bring from a pilot into the national-wide implementation. We are part of a GOAP member. We, Rekam Nusantara Foundation, strongly endorse a collaborative action toward a sustainable development. And as part of the GOAP member, we can connect with community practitioners related to the ocean account around the world to ensure that the value of our marine resources are recognized and cherished.
Key themes highlighted there about the importance, for want of a better word, of working together across institutional boundaries, across countries. And one of the things that is common, I suggest, everywhere, is that ocean accounting is very important, but also very new. And we're seeing here that all countries are not following stereotypical journeys. This is an example where countries anywhere in the world and stakeholders anywhere in the world can really adopt and drive global leadership on this issue. And that's exactly what we're seeing on the ocean accounting subject, amongst many others.
I'm here to present a summary of the breakout session on ocean accounting and the IC Treaty. We had a lively, informative discussion on 4 questions related to alignment, monitoring, evaluation, and challenges, including opportunities of implementing ocean accounting in the context of the IC. Here, we also spoke about legal enforcement. How can we enforce the implementation of ocean accounting on the IC when the treaty itself did not provide that? There's no provision for that in the treaty itself. The fourth question was on how developing countries can overcome challenges in adopting ocean accounting on the IC. So here we discussed that developing country needs to build their capacity and also technology transfer, as well as collaborating with counterparts from the global north in order to ensure that their capacity to develop ocean accounting and also for technology that is needed for ocean accounting in the IC is built over the years. Here we also discussed that collating ocean account is costly, it is time-consuming, and that developing country may lack the resources and time to do this. So this calls again for more collaboration and more partnership to address issues such as data collection, data analysis, data standardization. We discussed that developing countries should also first focus on creating ocean accounts within their national jurisdiction, that is within the EEZ, and they can now use or build on that experience to develop ocean accounting on the high sea. Lastly, we discussed that the importance of stronger definition of what, in some contexts where there are disputes in the maritime boundary, deploying ocean accounting in this kind of terrain might be problematic, which is currently happening at national level, and while much more will happen in the IC when countries are in conflict even within the national territory. So these are some of the main points and questions that we discussed in the breakout session. I hope that this summary will stimulate further discussion and action on ocean accounting on the IC. Thanks for your attention.
So we also had 4 questions, but I'm going to sort of summarize them together here. What were the challenges and what were the opportunities, in a sense, around linking ocean accounts and sustainable ocean planning? So some of the key pieces that came out of that was there does seem to be a good amount of potential in this space about using ocean accounts to support this sort of notion of more integrated planning around linking the spatial, economic, environmental and social aspects that are inherent in a sustainable ocean plan. There is, however, I think, an ongoing challenge which comes from an accounting sort of space about what do you do first? Do you need ocean accounts in order to do sustainable ocean planning, or do you need a plan before you do the ocean accounts? And I think there's no perfect answer to that, the same as the chicken and the egg. But it's a matter of how do they sort of build together, because they do seem like fairly natural partners. There are, however, some data challenges that a number of participants observed, and those are ones that are going to have to be dealt with as we move forward. I think there's this sense that in actual fact, the ocean accounts can help embed some systems thinking or integration across these different domains. And in particular, a couple of people highlighted the importance of equity considerations. So not just thinking beyond economic into environmental sustainability, but then into this sort of distribution of benefits and the well-being of people associated with any ocean environment, or any ocean context. So bringing that together, and the accounts might be a way of sort of bringing that together. Another potential benefit was around a common language and being able to use that to share experiences. At the same time, it was highlighted we need to be able to, each country needs to be able to deal with its circumstances itself. So we need to be flexible about how we're undertaking the implementation, both of sustainable ocean planning, but also of the ocean accounts themselves. A general message as well was around the importance of stakeholder engagement, of being able to link to the variety of different people in the space. And one that came out more specifically on that was this potential to learn from other sectors like the forestry sector or the mining sector. They were highlighted in the Indonesian case, who've been looking at the role of accounts and the links to policy. So there may be some opportunities there to look at what might be the way in which we build these links between ocean accounts and sustainable ocean planning might be something we can build from. I'll then just run through a few ideas that came up with in terms of what GOAP might do. And the role it could play. The general sort of call was for this ongoing role of GOAP in its awareness raising about this potential of ocean accounts. As part of that, maybe a targeting at an executive level, maybe policy execs might be one way to go about things. There was this notion to think about the demonstration and how we do the demonstration of the benefits of accounting to support policy and particularly sustainable ocean planning. But maybe we need to think a little bit outside the box about how we go about doing that. One thought was that we could start to build up rather than national, look at community level focuses. There's clearly a requirement to keep on working on the data side of things in terms of data solutions, data management, data collection opportunities. And then finally, the issue around capacity building, that we need to keep working in that. In a couple of areas, one about the frameworks, just keeping on building up how SEA and the SNA and other statistical frameworks link together within ocean accounts, but also on concepts and methods. One point that was noted about moving from pilot to national applications requires you to think a bit more broadly about what the solutions might be in applying the conceptual and the theoretical aspects. I'll stop there. There seems to be a great opportunity and an ongoing role for GOAP. Thank you.
So during the discussion, we focus on the ocean accounts and detailing on climate change impact and also determining the level of usefulness. So there are a couple of questions that we would like to recap. The first one on linkage between the ocean accounts and climate change. We acknowledge that climate change is well measured globally, but still lack in the local scale measurements. So that's why we would like to emphasize the inclusion of data, climate data in accounting framework. And then also they need to distinguish between correlation and also causation when identifying climate change as a cause of ecosystem decline. For example, were provided such as the linking between the typhoon influenced by climate change to their impact to the mangrove ecosystem. And then the second one, we also discussed the integration of climate change impact into the ocean accounts, and it is relevant to the core purpose of these accounts. So we highlight that there are some benefits of incorporating the climate change in development planning and the potential use of statistics from disaster management studies to address the linkage between climate change and ocean accounts. And then we also highlight the conversation upon the blue carbon accounting and also sustainable financing and the roles of ocean account in influencing the climate framework, for instance, the Paris Agreement. And the inclusion of mitigation and adaptation measure in ocean accounts was also raised as for the next step regarding to the future step for the communities. We highlight there are important of developing more regional and project level of ocean accounts and ecosystem accounts. We also discuss the challenge of track the adaptation and also mitigation spend in ocean accounts. That's why we need the transparency in the metric for engaging with voluntary, for instance, the voluntary carbon markets. And lastly, I would like to highlight there are very much complexity to operational the ocean accounts. For instance, in attributing the specific change in marine ecosystem linkage with the climate change. And that's also raised the question about what kind of methodology and approach that should be addressed to tackle this challenge.
Fisheries and Oceans Canada is proud to be the co-chair of the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, together with the United Nations Economics and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. This journey started 5 years ago when the United Nations Economics and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific called for states to participate in the development and implementation of ocean accounts. This was followed by the foundation of the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, which has grown to 28 members, including the 6 new members we welcome this year. This growing membership has allowed us to make significant strides in creating a coalition of willing and committed partners, including regional communities of practice, to highlight the importance of ocean accounts in the delivery of international and national sustainable ocean policy commitments. Pilot projects by partnership members have demonstrated the relevance of the core ocean accounts datasets, highlighting the need for an increased understanding of the scientific underpinnings of ecosystems and the services they provide. Canada has benefited greatly from participation in past dialogues, as these events serve the important function of bringing together researchers and representatives from around the world to share experiences and knowledge. We are confident that ocean accounting will continue to play a pivotal role in providing and strengthening the foundation to advance international efforts to promote the sustainable development of the ocean.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today about natural capital accounting in the Northeast Atlantic. First of all, what is OSPAR? OSPAR is the mechanism by which Western governments and the EU protect the marine environment of the Northeast Atlantic. OSPAR exists since 1972, something like that, and has been focusing primarily on ecological and chemical monitoring in the past. Economic analysis is something that is relatively new to OSPAR. Most countries that are a member of OSPAR are also member states of the European Union, which requires member states to use the marine environment in a sustainable way. But what does sustainable development and use mean exactly? How do you measure and operationalize that? That is one of the things that I think that natural capital accounting could play a role. Another thing that the European member states have to apply with, it's the European Biodiversity Strategy. This one requires member states to map and assess ecosystem services. And if you look at the more recent update of the European Biodiversity Strategy 2030, which is also part of the European Green Deal, it also explicitly stimulates ecosystem accounting. So there is an urgent need for European countries to work on ecosystem accounting. One of the first things we were thinking is, okay, what can we do with ecosystem services and natural capital accounting? We organized a workshop, had a contribution from the United Nations, OECD, various countries, various institutes in the Netherlands, and we had some discussions on different approaches that one could take. Which approach should OSPAR take if we are going to do something with ecosystem services? And that is a question I asked to a student, Peter Verdetennikov, and he provided a nice overview of various possible approaches. And then I asked him, yes, that's nice, but which one should we choose? Okay, it was not really possible to say, okay, this is the approach that you should take. Now we were thinking, wait a minute, but in the next couple of decades, we expect a tremendous increase in offshore wind farms in the OSPAR area, the Northeast Atlantic. So maybe we should look at, or could look at, what impacts could this offshore wind farms have in terms of ecosystem services. Okay, if we have those wind farms, definitely there are some benefits, but there are also some threats. So that's decided to do, to look at the bow tie analysis, analyze the impacts on ecosystem services. And one of the things we found out is that it's really hard to come up with a more quantitative analysis. But after that, we started preparing the OSPAR Quality Status Report for 2023. The main objective of this Quality Status Report is to provide a comprehensive and up-to-date assessment of the status of the Northeast Atlantic. Like to increase our knowledge and understanding of the marine environment by monitoring and assessment the state of the marine environment, but also say something about human activities that benefit from the marine environment. The Quality Status Report, and if you look at the structure of the Quality Status Report, it really starts by the data. So from the bottom up to, okay, data, indicators, thematic assessments, and then a synthesis. And as you can see, more than 130 different assessments are done. OSPAR started with chemical and ecological monitoring. Now having also this economic monitoring or data analysis, we thought might be good to have a more integrated analysis, not having everything in silos, but try to come up with a more integrated approach. One of the things that we did also with the economics working group, focusing on scenario analysis, and we also looked at how do changes in the marine environment have an impact on ecosystem services. So we looked at, for that aspect, we looked at 17 different ecosystem services. And by the way, we did that for 16 different thematic assessments, where we try to at least come up with some qualitative feeling of, we think there is a significant link between this change in the marine environment and ecosystem service? If so, is it medium, high, or low impact? Going a step beyond towards natural capital accounting, on the 1st of October 2021, OSPAR decided upon the Northeast Atlantic Environmental Strategy. That one includes as one of the objectives that OSPAR will start to do something with natural capital accounting. Okay, what has been done? In 2021, Maria produced the first version of natural capital accounts of the Northeast Atlantic. She really did a tremendous job drawing on experiences and literature from the World Bank, United Nations, obviously using the ecosystem accounting framework, but also obviously using as much as possible the data that are already out there. As far as we know, this has been the first time ever that natural capital accounts have been produced for a regional scene. And what she did, she provided an extent account. She looked into the condition accounts and also developed a supply and use accounts for ecosystem services in both fiscal and monetary terms. And also based on that, she provided a monetary asset account. The report can be downloaded from this website. If you look at ecosystem accounting in Europe, there are lots of examples of ecosystem accounts for the terrestrial part. The sea is three-dimensional, and it definitely adds an additional challenge. And with respect to the condition account, as said before, OSPAR has a long history of providing and monitoring data on ecological and chemical status. But there is so much data that the problem is, what data do we need and what data should we choose? And at the same time, nice to have lots of data, but most data are not spatially explicit. For example, lots of data are related to the national continental shelf and not really focusing on what you would like to have, the ecological status of a particular ecosystem. So it's difference in the spatial explicitness. With respect to the ecosystem services. This first version presented data for a limited number of ecosystem services. As said, it was only a 6-month project, and this was really a tremendous job already done. So we asked another student to, based on the work that Maria did, come up with a second version. In that second version, Marta has been updating the data that Maria has already provided and added some more ecosystem services, and also looked into the condition account. What she also did, she updated some ecosystem services data that was already provided by Maria in the first version, and added coastal protection and visual amenity services as new ecosystem service. The key challenge accounted for, you have lots of data that are available at national scale, but no, it's not really that much data that are really focusing on specific ecosystem types. One other thing is, okay, nice to have these different accounts, but the challenge is also in really integrate. And though data can be limited, this should definitely not be a reason to refrain from creating and working with natural capital accounts. I would like to stress again that the European Commission has decided to have this biodiversity strategy and wanted to come up with more ecosystem accounting in Europe. But okay, nice and good if member states have to apply ecosystem accounting, but we better make sure that it's going to be something useful. And therefore, we would like to organize a new initiative, European Working Group on Marine Natural Capital Accounting, where we can really discuss how we can make sure that ecosystem and natural capital accounting are most useful to support policy making. So we'd like to have people from the statistics side, ecological people, policymakers, and all kinds of people that have an interest in natural capital accounting. And when I was discussing this idea with Phil, he already said, that sounds good. Might be a good idea to start a GOAP community of practice for Europe. So if you're interested, please send me an email. And I would like to end with a dream. I think it would be very nice if the natural capital accounts could provide the quantitative basis underlying the TEPSA framework.
I thought the key lesson that you brought up there in green was really interesting, that whilst data might be seen as a barrier, you didn't let this worry you, and you courageously identified what could be done now. And you've taken it a step further in the second version. I think that's a lesson to us all, that don't let data be your barrier. Let's see what can be done.
It is indeed a great honor and privilege to be part of this important dialogue. As you've heard, my name is Yvonne Waweru, and I work for a project called the Western Indian Ocean Governance Initiative, which is funded by the German Federal Ministry for International Cooperation and Development, and it's implemented jointly by GIZ and the Nairobi Convention, the regional SEAS program for the Western Indian Ocean, hosted by UNEP. So I'll start with a general overview of the Western Indian Ocean region. As there are 10 countries, and it's a very important area. It's a high biodiversity hotspot. You have about 40 EBSAs there and about 700 seamounts, and lots of marine species, about 11,000, with 13% being endemic, 83% of non-fish species, and it's also an economic important area for the 65 million people that live within 100 kilometers of the coast, and contributing considerably to global fisheries catch, for example, and other economic activities, including new and emerging areas such as oil and gas, offshore oil and gas. Indeed, despite the glorious story of the Wayo region, there are existing threats, some long-standing. For example, loss of biodiversity, illegal fishing, overfishing, and pollution, especially from land-based sources. And all these compounded by new factors such as the impacts of climate change. We still have a problem of adequate governance in the region, and of course, new opportunities such as oil and gas exploration and big infrastructural developments such as ports. Yeah, so just to give you an overview of the existing governance framework at the regional level. So in terms of environmental protection, we have the Nairobi Convention that's shown in the first diagram there. So it's the regional seas program administered by UNEP. In addition, we have regional fisheries bodies, for example, Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, which is a tuna RFMO, and the Southwestern Indian Ocean Fisheries Commission, which is a scientific advisory fisheries body. Also, we have several regional economic commissions, which operate within the framework of the African Union. So really, you can see at the regional level, there's lots of bodies and players covering a range of sectors, and all these need to work together. Slide is focused on what we've been doing, and it relates to the development of a regional ocean governance strategy. So the Africa Ministerial Conference on Environment, way back in 2015, asked regional seas program in Africa to develop strategies, ocean governance strategies for the region. And the Nairobi Convention area did this through a formal process through a conference of parties, which mandated countries to come up with a strategy. And governance is fragmented as we know it, ocean governance. And therefore we had to come up structured way of bringing all the sectors and actors together to develop a strategy which would allow for ownership and effective implementation. So we came up with a task force consisting of Nairobi Convention contracting parties, regional economic commissions, representatives from science and civil society, for example. And this core team has been leading the process and through engaging in technical dialogues to inform the strategy. And this includes a range of topics from fisheries, marine spatial planning, plastics, etc. And as you can see there, ocean accounting is one of the key topics identified as a priority for the strategy. Related to that, we also have an information management strategy under development, which aims to provide a framework for sharing data and information that can assist with decision-making. And we also came up with a similar approach. We had a working group, a multi-stakeholder working group consisting of countries, representatives from science, civil society, with a focus on data and information specialists, also engaging in technical dialogues on different topics, including data sharing frameworks, how to make systems interoperable, and again, ocean accounting was identified as a priority for information and data management in the region. So these two processes are still ongoing, and we anticipate that they shall be complete by the end of the year in time for the next conference of party, which is likely to take place first quarter of next year for adoption. There has been some project support to help develop these strategies, including the project that I work for, that's the Wayoji project, and other projects funded in the context of the Nairobi Convention. And as a follow-up, for example, we have what we call the transboundary diagnostic analysis. That's a GEF terminology and under the LME approach, and implemented these two projects that are supporting the process. And it's in the process of being updated. And building on this process and these two strategies, ocean accounting has been proposed as one of the strategic actions for the Nairobi Convention area moving forward. I'd like to just highlight what I would call them preliminary, but also substantive discussions on where ocean accounting fits in the regional ocean governance strategy. So in general, of course, ocean governance supports ocean accounting and vice versa. And what countries and all the stakeholders engaged in the process found is that it can contribute significantly to provide a baseline for the state of the WIO. And I'm glad that the OSPA region has done this, and they would provide some valuable lessons. And this can support different tracking information or help to support reporting under different processes. For example, the UN regular process, AU policies, and also the regional economic commissions. Let me also say that there has been some attempts to do different assessments in the region. I think that happens every 5 years. So we're not starting from a clean sheet of paper. Most of it has been piecemeal, and ocean accounting would definitely provide a very structured way of doing it. And of course, this can also be used to suggest targets for ocean sustainability in the region, to inform decision-making, and of course, bridging to the different sectors and the sciences. And I know the OSPA Commission has been focusing on ecosystem accounting, but we also see an important role in terms of, for example, social reporting on social economics, for example, incomes, employment, and economic values of the region. And ultimately, we see ocean accounting playing an important role in monitoring and evaluation of the strategy. But this is more in general terms. At the regional level, we have to be very specific because there are several countries involved, and the regional approach definitely needs a tailor-made way of doing it. And this would require transboundary cooperation, and we see those sectors highlighted there as playing an important role in this, for example, fisheries, biodiversity, pollution and oil spill, and climate change. So moving forward, and perhaps what we need to agree on in terms of incorporation of ocean accounting in the regional ocean governance strategy is some consensus on what are the priority focal areas that can be tackled at the regional level. And we have to be practical about it. For example, we don't have all the data, so we have to take that into account. We also have to look at the human capacity and resources, and also a framework or regional agreement to cooperate on ocean accounting. A good starting point would be a synthesis on the state of ocean accounting in the WIO based on available information, what are the gaps that are there, and look at the possibility of compiling this regional information, and of course a roadmap with the priorities and the resources and concrete timelines would be needed. As I said, this is still an ongoing process, but we see that the regional ocean governance strategy could definitely support the development of ocean accounting, both at the regional level and at the national level in the countries. Of course, with a starting point or a focus on regional synthesis.
So what I really want to just capture here, a lot of this talk is going to be about what is proposed, and it particularly talks to aspects of ocean governance, because it's within the regional ocean governance strategy of the Nairobi Convention that we want to position ocean accounts. So people's interaction with the ocean really centers on two aspects: direct ocean blue economy, the formal and informal resource uses and associated pressures, and the indirect benefits that humans obtain from the ocean space. And it's those direct resource uses and pressures of blue economies that require adaptive and informed ocean governance. There are three really important aspects within current ocean governance principles that I want to highlight here. Firstly, that ocean values have for far too long been based on limited economic data only, without including aspects of the social or aspects of the environmental. The second aspect that I want to put across refers to ocean change. Ocean change across three dimensions. Oceans are changing, ocean resource uses are changing, and the way we monitor and measure oceans are changing radically. If I look at the way we do ocean sciences now compared to how we used to. The third important aspect to consider here is that blue economies are underpinned by sustainable ocean development. Sustainable development is often portrayed by independent, overlapping, and nested tripartite economic, social, and environmental sustainability pillars. And the mechanisms of integration of such pillars within the ocean space is not well defined. Informed and adaptive ocean governance for sustainable ocean development requires both the information on ocean change and the information on the integration of these sustainability pillars. And regular and standardized ocean accounts within ocean accounts frameworks provide the platform both for the domain integration and the development of benchmarked indicators of such ocean change. Within the Nairobi Convention Regional Ocean Governance Strategy, there are a number of different ocean accounting approaches which could be initiated. These could include aggregation and alignment of particular sectoral accounts. It's standardized regional accounts across the Nairobi Convention region for formal industry sectors, for example, for fisheries or oil and gas exploration, ocean protection services, etc. Secondly, we could look at aggregation and alignment of area-based national regional ecosystem accounts for selected systems, for regional mangrove accounts or seagrass accounts, for example, and their associated ecosystem services, and thematic blue carbon or protected area accounts in relation to these. However, a particularly important aspect within the Western Indian Ocean is the extent of community economies, subsistence economies in the region that are not well captured by national accounts. And I will propose here that we look towards, within this region, the development of novel methodologies for informal community accounts at local scales that align with coastal ecosystem resource uses and talk to methodologies that are scalable and transferable. And here we're really filling in data gaps because a lot of this is about data availability, sharing, and sovereignty, and also the need for capacity development within this space. But there's an entire area here that is really important within the Western Indian Ocean in terms of community economies, subsistence, and informal uses that I think is imperative that we look at in a regional scale. Bring this missing information into the accounting equation here. Within the Western Indian Ocean at the moment, we have been centered largely on marine ecosystem accounts. We're starting to look at the resource uses and pressures from direct use in formal sectors and informal sectors, indirect uses, intangible or non-use values that are incredibly difficult to put handles on, those that occur in the ocean, but also the support services that occur terrestrially in terms of commercial and non-commercial aspects. But as I say, it's the accounting for community economies that we think has got particular value in this regional approach here. We've started this work within Mozambique in the Bazaruta region, but looking towards expanding to other areas in the Kilifi County coast of Kenya, in the coast of Nosy Bay in Madagascar, and in the Zanzibar region. The way we've been looking at this is looking at remote sensed ecosystem accounts of seagrasses, coral reefs, mangroves, sandy shores, looking at ecosystem service factors in order to develop particular ecosystem asset accounts and ecosystem service accounts, how particular communities in the bottom right benefit at different levels. And that informal and subsistence level is, I think, really important to capture here, and we need to look at novel ways of capturing these sort of uses that are not readily captured in national accounts. And how do they compare to small-scale, semi-industrial and industrial sectors? But I think the other really important aspect here is the stakeholder engagement with communities, particularly in terms of ecosystem condition, and to get community voice, community perceptions of how system conditions are changing, because they've been using these systems for years and are well positioned to provide point of departure information on how systems are changing, and also how those particular communities are adapting to such changes. So what we're really looking at here is utilizing changing ocean sciences within ocean accounts frameworks to measure changing ocean systems and changing ocean resource uses at community levels. But I think the important part about here is that within the Western Indian Ocean, we have the opportunities to develop methodologies for informal economic indicators to incorporate within informed ocean governance processes that are different to how ocean accounts would be carried out elsewhere. And I think that gives us the opportunity within the Nairobi Convention to look at this really important aspect. To finish off, the important aspect I think would be the local pilot studies are critically important to develop these particular accounts, but also associated with scaling from subnational, local to supranational regional within the Western Indian Ocean region. The alignment of the regionally important informal coastal economies with the more formal economic metrics, but also the alignment of informal coastal economies and local knowledge within ecosystem accounts in a two-way process of benefits and the perceived ecosystem changes that coastal communities are so well attuned to.
It's really great to see ocean accounts as a key topic in the strategy. That's really, really exciting. Hopefully we can see the WEO region being sort of the next one for the pure sort of full regional accounts. Hopefully the learning goes from WEO to OSPAR, and OSPAR's next edition of the accounts includes the learnings from the WEO experience, particularly on those social aspects and the informalized economies, which obviously still exist in those countries in the regions of OSPAR. It's obvious that there are distinct disparities in capacity and data generation and the management for ocean accounting. What strategies are being used to bridge the gaps between the data generation and the management?
A very important question. Yes, that's true. That's correct. There are data gaps and differences in capacities between different countries and also between stakeholders. So we have some countries that are very advanced in terms of data collection and data systems in place, and other stakeholders like NGOs who regularly develop these systems. So through the strategy, the information management strategy, we are trying to bridge this gap by providing a structured way of bringing together the strong points of the strong stakeholders and those who do not have in a way that is useful for each user. And of course, that would require or entail development of a system that works to accommodate those disparities. Of course, this is not easy, and that's why one of the key topics, for example, to consider is how we make existing systems interoperable so that they can speak to each other, for lack of a better word, in a way that is useful for all data users, especially decision makers and also several stakeholders, including local communities.
Rob, did you want to comment at all on the data deficiencies and how you tried to bridge the gap in the OSPAR region?
Within OSPAR, we have a long history in collecting data, and both at European level, but also in OSPAR, we try to, with consistent approaches. It is definitely a challenge. One of the things that OSPAR has been dealing with is trying to come up with some common indicators for which OSPAR thinks it is important to have data everywhere across the OSPAR area. And there are a couple of other indicators where we think, okay, it might be good to have at least information in those areas where particular problems arise. We are still working on trying to find out what data do we want to collect, when, how should we monitor, and things like that. That is definitely still an issue, both for the type of data that we have been collecting ever since the 1970s, but also obviously for the more new and emerging topics and substances.
How much consideration is there given to the multicultural conceptualizations, such as the IBIS nature contributions to people? And what are the differences that this could make for ocean accounting, and how do we have to adapt the system basically to take account of this, I think?
So I think the important thing here is that there's the classic CITES ecosystem services approach of provisioning regulatory or cultural. I think quite often those provisional services have very strong cultural components, and particularly at a community level where a particular food security might have very strong cultural components, etc. These are quite difficult to tease apart. One of the really important aspects here is to ensure that we are looking at things through a lens that captures that important cultural component. But cultures are dependent on value systems that can be very different across cultures, and of course are very, very difficult to get a quantifiable handle on. And I think it's an area that we're going to have to look at very, very strongly in terms of community approaches within the Western Indian Ocean, because they are so important. I'm tempted to say watch this space, because I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on how we adequately capture the importance of those cultural aspects within metrics such as these.
Some places that might be data poor within the scientific community and scientific knowledge are data rich in other knowledge and other knowledge systems. How do we take account of those other knowledge systems and that localized knowledge about the ocean, the state of the ocean, etc., within the accounting systems? Ken, I wonder whether you can just follow up with that one. Giving you
thanks for that. Returning here to what I heard for the first time as an acronym of MILK, and those are Marine, Indigenous and Local Knowledge Systems. And I think the aspects here talk to the importance of that knowledge, because I think there is so much tied to that knowledge that we would miss without having extensive engagement with those particular resource users. Knowledge of systems, knowledge of the way systems are changing, traditional systems, etc., that talk to cultures, etc. And I think for far too often, or not for far too often, but I do think we've possibly overlooked some of this in the way we're approaching ocean accounts from a more traditional level. I think what I'm saying here is that I think we need a new lens here in order to capture some of these. Otherwise, we've got a whole component here that we're not accounting for. This is about making, a lot of this is about human well-being, and we're going to be missing a huge component there if we don't have a look at some of these aspects.
What is the opportunity? I don't know if Yvonne or Ken wants to answer this, but what is the opportunity in using ocean accounts at the WEO region to drive sustainable ocean finance? Is it there, and how can we best take advantage of that?
Well, there are two aspects that are really quite critical here. One is to look at the investment opportunities and where there are finance needs. I think there's another really important kind of flip side of this in terms of utilizing ocean accounts to tick and measure some of the deliverables in terms of many of the ocean or blue economy financing kind of arrangements. And so I really think that there's quite a critical, important component in terms of how do we use ocean accounts to really inform the aspects of not only what financing is needed, what mechanisms, what sources, etc., but how strategies have been implemented as well.
Yeah, I also see a very important role in terms of tracking financial flows to the region. And whether it's investment or donor funding, there's a lot that's been happening that often is not reported, for example. And I think it's important to use that to track the different flows to the region, in and out of the region. And yeah, I definitely see an important role there. Thank you.
It was a very good discussion across a number of issues, and all of them I think headline as yes, we need to include climate change, but be wary because there are a lot of thorny issues involved. We talked about blue carbon, which is probably the headline or the charismatic epifauna of the climate change relationship to oceans these days. And it's a very high discussion, but the technical issues involved, particularly the valuation of it, were very difficult. The reliance of a variety of debt instruments or offsets on blue carbon, which is a growing market field, heavily promoted in a number of circles, however, has some serious questions because the climate change, the very thing that that blue carbon is supposed to prevent, is also reducing the amount of blue carbon at the same time that it's storing it. There's a widespread agreement that adaptation and mitigation expenditures should be included, but the real question in a lot of this is what are the risks involved? How are risks being incorporated? And there is some discussion about a much more explicit risk framework for the ocean accounting related to climate change than is currently done with simply stocks and flows. The risks need to be more explicitly included in the effects. We also talked about the problems, large-scale problems, like the decline of oceans ability to provide oxygen, how will that show up? And that shows up in a set of cascading effects. Are the ocean accounts going to pick up those cascading effects as well as the basic effects? And in all of this, there remains the perennial set of questions about how some of the economic analysis and some of the traditional accounting analysis are going to account for some of the underlying complexities in the natural environment created by climate change.
The importance of repeated measures to look at changes in a balance sheet approach is particularly important, that to develop particular indicators that can be used in planning. The importance of equity and inclusivity within sustainability was noted a couple of times in the terms of the kind of almost fixed levels of natural capital, but increasing resource uses and how we ensure equitable access. The siloed approach to data, and also data that might not have been entirely collected in the fit-for-purpose approach for ocean accounts, and so that there's a need for looking at data veracity, but in order to break down that siloed approach in terms of data availability, and particularly in terms of transdisciplinary approaches to data within different aspects of ocean accounts. It was also noted that it's not only the data that are often siloed, it's also the governance is often siloed, and we need to break down that particular siloed governance as well. A listing of 3 approaches that were put forward in terms of how important oceans accounts are in the space to establish baselines, secondly, to monitor trends, and also to use ocean accounts in terms of the finance aspects of blue economy frameworks and ocean governance and sustainable ocean plans. There was a suggestion for the framing of risk and the looking of risk, the investigation of risk within ocean accounts. And this might be a particularly pertinent way in getting the message across, particularly to decision makers. It was also important that we talk a common language, and that there was a need to engage, and that there was a need for dialogue between ocean accounts practitioners and the developers of sustainable ocean plans. The use of ocean accounts, or the alignment of ocean accounts in other ocean governance tools, marine spatial planning, etc., was identified. And really, finally, the need to produce concrete examples of how ocean accounts have been used in sustainable ocean plans would be very, very useful in order to really increase the uptake, increase the enthusiasm for the positioning of ocean accounts within sustainable ocean planning. Realizing, of course, that both ocean accounts and sustainable ocean plans are relatively new concepts, and we're probably not in the position to provide such concrete evidence at the moment, but they would be very, very useful for that.
So our session was mostly looking at the alignment of the implementation of ocean accounts in regards to the High Seas Treaty, and how we can sort of ensure mutual reinforcement in that regard. Talked about how sort of ocean accounting can sort of help with establishing marine protected areas, how it can help with the monitoring and measuring effectiveness and progress to the High Seas Treaty, and how sort of it can help with establishing innovative financing and benefit sharing mechanisms, and how they both sort of are in line in terms of this integrated approach to this environmental, social, and economic dimensions of the oceans. There was this discussion on who should start this discussion on institutional arrangements, countries. There was this discussion on importance of connectivity. How are the ecosystems connected to the high seas, and how the ocean islands can focus this connectivity issue as well, since their economies depend so much on the oceans. So the role of ocean islands and small island development states was highlighted. In terms of capacity building, on how to strengthen the capacity of developing countries and in the ways that they participate, and how to make this attractive for these countries to get involved, given that they already find this very hard to monitor and get data of coastal ecosystem in the first place. There was a talk on benefit sharing as well, and how this is a controversial topic, and as to how much should be shared by who, and how sort of ocean accounting can help with sort of assessing the values. And then there's some talk around how there's a few actors and industries dominating the ocean space, and how access is a challenge, and how sort of interest of community can be taken into account, and how water column has different interests and different uses. Just quickly on the capacity development, again, it was emphasized, and how the use of identifiers to map out the genetic resources, and this Article 14, which takes on a tiered approach on how much we gain from marine genetic resources, and then just some important bits on monitoring and implementation, as well as sort of looking beyond BB&J, and sort of sharing information between countries, and this because of this transboundary elements of ocean accounting, and how the implementation and effective monitoring can be achieved through these pilot exercises. And lastly, how ocean accounting brings this opportunity to sort of measure progress towards the targets in the High Seas Treaty, and sort of beyond into the SDGs and Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework.
It's really hard to give your key takeaways from these sorts of sessions, because there's so much discussed, and we all take different aspects from these sorts of sessions, and that's really important because it builds the wealth of knowledge, and it inspires us in different ways. But I suppose my three key takeaways would probably be, back in 2019, I doubt in Sydney we would have dreamed of being able to do regional accounts at the sort of scale that we're talking about doing, and with the sort of ambition that we're talking about today. So that is a massive progress in the ocean accounting arena, and I think that's really exciting. Focused on today, I think there's some great areas that have been mentioned about progressing the research to support ocean accounting global activity, be that the social and equity aspects, be that the aspects associated with risk, how to use data for finance mobilization, indicator identification, actually many others. They were just to pick a few. My last takeaway is the incredible importance and the huge value we get from having multiple disciplines in the room. The importance of having environmental economic accountants, economists, scientists, climate change specialists, governance specialists, risk specialists. We need all of these people in the room, and not just one of each. We need multiple of each, because we all bring so many different perspectives, different experiences to this, and that makes the discussion rich, but also develops the agenda far more substantively and far more impactfully. The one thing I did miss off there, which I really don't want to miss off, and it's really important, is the policy professionals and the policy specialists who really have to do some of this.